And there's another problem, customers say, buried in the fine print of the contract. The first order of business, Centerpoint says, cutting and clearing down trees and limbs like you see behind me so that those line workers can come over here and do their job. We're still waiting for more records, about this many more. So the number of botched recycling loads is likely to grow into an even bigger recycling mess. Your employees got an inside deal, and you chose the price.
You're correct.
The election judges we spoke would say, given the high turnout election, they feel they didn't have enough paper ballots to begin with. And when they called for extras, they say they waited and waited and waited some more. Where did the pill that killed Joshua come from? Most likely through here, the U.S.-Mexico border. This tiny town of 250 people that once had 50 officers on the force now has none.
New tonight, a tiny Texas town of about 250 people has 50 sworn police officers on the force.
We're talking about Coffee City. That's up in Henderson County, some 3 hours north of Houston. They have one cop for every 5 residents. And what's more, Jeremy Rogalski discovered many of those officers have a history of problems wearing the badge.
On the banks of Lake Palestine, some 3 hours north of Houston, this dot on the map has quite a reputation among those who drive through.
They're everywhere, literally everywhere.
They run back and forth, back and forth.
A lot of officers policing a very small number of people.
Only 249 people, says the sign on the edge of town. And when you add up all the full-time cops and reserves, 50 officers.
Good Lord, that's crazy.
If it's such a small town, why do we need so many? It makes no sense. Why do you need that many officers?
Coffee City hauled in $1 million in court fines last year for more than 5,000 violations, officers wrote, the most in the state for a town its size. But this isn't a story about a small town writing a bunch of tickets. You see, Coffee City is a magnet for troubled cops. How do we know? KHOU 11 Investigates obtained personnel records from other police agencies and found more than half of Coffee City officers had been suspended, demoted, terminated, or dishonorably discharged from their previous jobs. A dozen were even criminally charged.
I was astounded to think that they've been hired by another agency.
Greg Freeman is a Sam Houston State criminal justice professor and retired Houston police captain.
I've never seen anything like that in my professional career, and I've seen a lot.
Their prior discipline ranges from excessive force to public drunkenness, untruthfulness, and association with known criminals. Criminal charges include DWI, theft, aggravated assault, family violence, and endangering a child.
If you knowingly are hiring an officer that has a very troubled past and history and has no business to be wearing a uniform, and it's a very, very precarious slope that city is engaging in by hiring.
This is the man who hired them. Chief John J. Portillo quadrupled the department's size since he took the job 2 years ago. He says to provide 24/7 coverage for the town. Why would you hire so many people with all these red flags?
There's more to just what's on paper. And that's where I rely on my captain and my background investigators to go in and dig and say, hey, what's the truth behind this?
The chief says criminal charges were often dismissed, dishonorable discharges overturned. He claims most applicants hired got on the wrong side of agency politics.
If you go back to the totality of a lot of these officers' stuff, I would say 75%, or if not more, they're being retaliated against from their agency.
Retaliate? Mm-hmm. Why would you take a chance, Chief?
I try to look at the good in everybody, and I believe everybody deserves an opportunity.
You give a lot of opportunities.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
The opportunity to wear a badge allows his officers to work extra jobs, which can mean real money, $50 an hour or more.
I mean, let's not hide it from anybody. They're making probably about $80,000 to $100,000 a year doing that.
And I asked Portillo directly, does he get a cut of his officers' extra job wages? Twice during our interview, the chief said no. The only money he makes from extra jobs is from the ones he works himself. And that takes us from Coffee City to Houston and what's coming up tomorrow night at 10.
Call Garcia right now. Tell his
That's Chief Portillo caught on camera cussing out an elected Harris County constable Portillo was working security for a Southeast Houston apartment complex nearly 200 miles away from Coffee City. More on that video and what else we learned about Chief Portillo's past as our investigation continues tomorrow at 10.
CenterPoint has repeatedly said clearing so many downed trees has been a challenge in getting the power back on. But what has the company done for preventative tree maintenance? Jeremy Rogalski and the KHOU 11 Investigates team found out how much it spends on that, and you may not like what you hear. Jeremy?
Mia, it's known as a vegetation management plan in the industry, and after Hurricane Ike back in 2008, Texas passed a law requiring companies to file one annually. Well, records show compared to some other companies last year, CenterPoint didn't spend much. The cleanup work continues at Araceli Arazzolo's house. She's been through her share of big storms here over the past 10 years.
And I've seen crews come out here to trim the trees along the power lines maybe one time.
Just once?
Yeah.
A few doors away, Judith Scott calls the idea of CenterPoint tree maintenance
fantasy, because I haven't ever seen them do that.
You don't have to look far in this neighborhood to see trees and branches surrounding power lines, and by now, we all know what can happen when that's the case. It's why Texas lawmakers passed a law after Hurricane Ike that requires electricity providers to report how much they spend on vegetation management per customer every year. Here's the breakdown for Houston area providers last year. Energy spent $62 per customer. Texas New Mexico Power spent just over $30. CenterPoint spent just over $16 per customer, and AEP Texas about $10 per customer.
It would be very interesting to see their spreadsheets and to see where the funds do go.
These CenterPoint customers say they pay their bills every month and deserve much better in return.
We're mad. We want our power. We want to feel safe in our homes. We want to know that we can survive a storm and the providers are going to be helping us, and it's not happening.
Now, I reached out to CenterPoint for comment twice today by email and text, once before 2 o'clock and later just before 5. I have not heard back.
Struck in the head in the Harris County Jail, KHOU 11 Investigates discovered it happens to hundreds of inmates every year.
And detention officers who delivered those blows did so under questionable circumstances. Investigative reporter Jeremy Rogalski joins us with more of his documentary online right now. Jeremy.
Mia and Len, we spent more than a year fighting for records and reviewed more than 3,000 reports when force was used at the jail over the past 4 years. They paint a picture that is not pretty. When detention officers repeatedly punched an inmate in this hallway, Elton Spicer spoke up.
That's when they told me to get back. Shut up, you want some too?
One officer approached Spicer, getting in his face.
I tell him, man, I don't want no problems, man. I'm chilling. I go to walk off. I put my hands in the air.
In the air, he says, to surrender.
I got 2-3 officers on me already. Boom, he just felt the need to just take off on me, punch me for no reason. I wasn't even a threat to him. Why did he punch me?
A blindside blow, sending the 270-pound Spicer stumbling to the floor, leaving him a bloody mess.
I think I'm still in shutdown mode right now.
Anna Cervantes lived through a similar ordeal.
It just felt horrible.
As officers walked her out of this day room, Cervantes grabbed one of their uniforms. In return, this. Struck in the head, tackled, then struck some more.
I didn't throw a punch, I didn't swing, I didn't slap, I didn't do anything violent. It's insane that this stuff happens.
Records reveal it happened nearly 4 times a week at the Harris County Jail. Inmates getting struck in the head under questionable circumstances.
I was pretty horrified by so much of what I read and saw.
Michelle Deitch at the University of Texas spent years researching and writing standards for use of force. Is there ever a time a blow to the head is okay?
Head strikes should be employed extremely rarely, only when there's an imminent risk of serious bodily harm or injury. They should really be thought of closer to a form of deadly force.
Yet over the past 4 years at the Harris County Jail, We identified 810 head strike cases where there was no risk of serious bodily harm, like inmates refusing orders, making verbal threats, or taking a fighting stance.
Using a head strike in that case is just to create pain for them, to force them to do something, and that's not appropriate.
Take the case of inmate Brian Neal Williams. He argued with a detention officer over a blanket to go to sleep.
He was really aggressive. Yes, he was. He was very aggressive. He got me real good.
But Williams is the one who got charged and serving time for assault.
That's not assault. The assault came when the officers started throwing blows at the individual's head.
Steve Sinclair is the former head of the Washington State prison system. He now consults on jail best practices.
In my experience, head strikes are reserved for the most severe of instances, not if somebody's tugging at your uniform.
Both experts say most head strike cases they reviewed could have been avoided.
It's called de-escalation. That's using verbal tactics, the tone of your voice, the rate of your speech, to see if you can de-escalate the situation,
instead of ramping it up.
I was stunned. In virtually every single case I looked at, there was nothing that I would consider de-escalation. Everyone's itching for a fight in almost every case that I saw.
And get this, in every case you just saw, none of the detention officers ever got disciplined. In fact, out of the more than 800 questionable head strike cases that we identified, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez and his command staff only punished a handful of detention officers. Len and Mia will have that part of the story tomorrow night at 10.
Oof, it's really something to watch.
Yeah.
Tough to watch, too. All right. And
Thanks,
you can
Jeremy.
watch our full documentary right now online at khou.com/struck or streaming on KHOU 11+.